I'm fired up and I'm ready to go. I'm fired up and I'm ready to go. I'm fired up and I'm ready to go. This is the Billionaire Brown experience. Let's go.
What's your story and how did you arrive to this calling that you have?
Yeah, my story. In 1990, that goes back to then. That's when my healing journey began. And I needed to get some help because I was having a really hard time. I was just freshly in college. And I went to a 12-step program, actually. And it was called CODA, Codependence Anonymous, because I had a problem. I was too much looking out there to get all my validation from people. And I had a really hard time just being with myself. So I went to meeting after meeting, and I pretty quickly got that this is my new path. This is my family. And I started sponsoring people in that program. And that is sometimes where I think some of the best education comes in terms of helping people with their issues. The 12-step programs are an incredible training ground to help others. And that evolved from there. I sponsored lots of people, and then I started speaking in meetings all up and down Los Angeles. And it seemed a little ridiculous at first. A 20-year-old is talking to people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s about relationship difficulty. But I had kind of a knack for it right off the bat. And I would say the thing that I had mostly was a whole lot of suffering behind me that led me to understanding people's pain and their hurt and their frustrations very deeply. And I had a way of helping them. So that led to other things in different groups. And I became, an assistant teacher in other groups. And now what I would say now it's actually 28 years later, is that it led me right to couples. And also I run a women's group. So I help marriages. I help save marriages regularly. And I run a women's group. Right now there's about 46 people in it. And we get on live calls like this, and we have 7, 8, 9, 10 women on the screen at the same time, and we're going through everything, how they do relationships, how they do dating, how they do marriages, and we learn a lot together. So I'm really grateful.
Okay, awesome. The question everybody's probably asking you is, how successful is your relationship?
How successful is my relationship? I've been dating a woman right now for a while, and we have just absolutely beautiful communication. It works
what's a while?
Amazingly. This has been about a year-long relationship.
Okay.
Yes. And what I would say is I had a 10-year marriage, and that marriage actually created some of the most beautiful clarity of my life. It led me directly to working with couples, because I actually myself was in marriage counseling with my wife and recognized that I want more out of a connection. I really, I teach this to people, I help people, and I finally slowed myself down enough to recognize I'm not able to go deeper in this relationship. And instead of, kind of doing what most couples do and arguing and fighting and trying to get her to change, I went and saw some real expert therapists myself. And after doing that, my wife and I actually saw a couple, 2 therapists, a married couple, and they helped me really realize that I couldn't have this deeper craving that I was wanting. And so I had to get divorced. It was very painful at the time, but it was some of my greatest learning of my life to, move me forward.
But was it that clear and simple as you're saying? Like, because normally it doesn't work out that way.
Right.
Was it very simple? You went to the counselor or therapist or the expert, and they told you, they sat down with you, they worked with you guys, and then it was like, oh yeah, I can't go any deeper in this relationship. And she said, oh, okay, you can't go any deeper. And that was it? Or was there some?
That's a really great question. So what was definitely not simple was my heart, and what was not simple was her heart and the hurting around all of this. That was very complicated. But I will tell you, we went to about 4 sessions that lasted anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours. And, you know, I remember in the very last session, I said something that I was upset about, and my wife gave her answer. And it took both therapists kind of getting behind my wife, and they were saying to her, you know, Derek just expressed something that was difficult, and he's not attacking you, and he's not putting you down. And what he would really like to do is to be able to sometimes say when things are upsetting for him, and he would like you to just listen without defending yourself. And basically, the therapist kind of looked at me and said, this is not going to happen in this relationship. You will not get to have this with this particular partner. So she tried so hard to do this. So this took me several months to kind of get out of denial about and recognize that I'm not going to get to have this kind of closeness that I want. So no, it wasn't simple. But in that last session, when the therapist looked at me and said, there's nothing more we can do here. She's going to continue being defensive with you, and we have not, in 10 hours of work, been able to penetrate that.
Okay, so
yeah.
When you're talking about defensive, what do we mean by defensive? Is it like, was that just the main theme? Like just you say something and then there's some defense to it? Or was it sometimes, was it literally like all the time? Like you say you have an issue with something and there was some defense to it? Or was it kind of like a give and take, but?
Good question. Good question. Yeah. So I was not, all the time presenting things I was upset about. This is something that happens. I mean, towards the end of the relationship, it was happening, let's say, twice a week. I would need to say something. And I think that defensiveness is it's one of the top 3 things I work with all the time. When I would say, I'll give you a specific example. When I would say to her, I'm really sad that I'm not connecting with my stepdaughter. Okay, that was actually her daughter. That was my stepdaughter. We raised these 2 children for 10 years together. And if I would say, I'm really upset, I'm not connecting with my stepdaughter, what she would hear is that I don't love her daughter. What she would hear is that she's a flawed mother. What she would hear is she's doing something wrong because I'm upset. Okay. Now she couldn't accurately get clear on that in her head. She would just have that type of thing happening. Obviously, that's my analysis of what was going on with her. And that's when she would respond what I call defensively. And we would then argue. And the only point was that I wanted to be listened to for being upset and have some empathy coming towards me, which never happened. So I would begin convincing her and trying to teach her to do that for me. That doesn't work. If you're in a relationship, you cannot be each other's counselors. It doesn't work. That's why I sought help.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen that are just tuning in, this is Derek Hart from understandingeachother.com. Derek, I want to know, you went to 4 sessions, right?
Yeah.
And at what point did this get revealed in the session?
Well, what I would talk about in the sessions was almost exactly what I just told you. I try to explain something. I try to express myself. I want to be heard, and she can't hear me. She won't listen. She thinks I'm always criticizing her and telling her that she's doing something wrong. And I believe I am making no mention of her at all in what I'm sharing. So it started very early in the sessions what the presenting problem was. And we worked on that over and over and over. And by that final last session, I remember the 2 therapists were literally sitting behind her, whispering in her ear, Derek hasn't attacked you, and nothing has happened where he said you've done anything wrong. And sometimes he even says things you're doing right just to try to get you to respond more positively. So we tried all the way to the end to understand each other about that. We couldn't get there.
Is that called something? Is that called something? Did like through the sessions or through your research and all of that, is that called something what she was dealing with, and is that called something what you weren't able to receive?
Yeah, that's interesting. Is that called something? That is called, there's not a specific term that I would use for it other than that's what, almost every person I've ever met has some kind of defense system when they feel attacked or criticized. So it kind of makes sense to defend yourself. But when that happens too often in a relationship, it is the start of almost every argument. Every single couple that actually comes here into this room and works with me, the way it works, even though all the stories are so different, the way it works is almost always the same. One person says something that's upsetting for them, and then it begins an argument because the other person doesn't hear it. So then they defend themselves. So then the other person starts trying to convince them to listen. And that's the start of every argument. So slowing that process down is what I help people do. Slowing it down to, the first couple sentences that come out of your mouth when you're saying what's bothering you are usually the full truth. And when a couple then goes into a 2, 3, 4, 5 hour argument after that first sentence that was the truth, that's what happens. I mean, couples actually sometimes show up to their first session here after they've been up for 8 hours arguing. And then I asked them, what was the first thing that was said? And the very first thing that was said was the truth. So I asked them to actually say that right now to the other person and have the other person kind of remain silent for a moment to actually hear that's the problem. So slowing it down, slowing it down, slowing it down. In between the arguing is actually where the substance is of what they're fighting about. They're never actually fighting about the thing they think they're fighting about. They're fighting about the fact that they don't feel safe to explain what they're feeling and be listened to with compassion. That's always almost always the fight.
Okay, so I'm curious to know, have you ever had to give the same advice that your therapist had to give to you at your sessions right there in that room? Have you ever had to, you have?
Oh, almost all the time. I would say, I ask some very...
Wait, you know the advice that I'm talking about? I'm talking about the advice of, this is not going to ever change.
Correct.
Oh, wow.
Yes. I ask a few questions in the very first session that are really telling. So I'll tell you a couple interesting things. A couple questions I ask the couple are, first of all, are you attracted to each other sexually? I'm not saying right now when they're at each other's throats fighting, but from the beginning of the relationship, were they attracted to each other? Hopefully the answer is yes. When the answer is no, we always kind of had a problem with that. Then we have a really tough path ahead of us. The other question I ask them is, how much did they have that in-love experience in the beginning? And when they actually don't even have that at the core, we have a long road ahead of us. So those are two very important questions. However, I would say about 15%, not 20, but about 15% of couples, I know within about an hour, sometimes 2 hours of work, that one of them is open to changing and hearing things they're doing that are causing difficulty and shifting it, because I teach vulnerability. I teach them how to be vulnerable. And I see sometimes one partner getting that and the other partner not getting that. So I'm not here to spend 1.5 years in counseling with them to just have them do the work and pay fees. I'm actually here to help them recognize that pretty quickly. And sometimes I do directly have to say, this is not going to change unless the one partner wants to shift. And I lay it out very gently. I would say I almost never offend the partners of a couple. They feel really comfortable with me just about all the time.
Okay, so let's assume that the answer to both of those two very important questions you just pointed out were yes.
Right.
What are some of the common things that are screwed up after that?
You know something? Let's look at a very first date. I'll really simplify this. Let's look at the couple's on a first date. They feel those kind of sparkly in love feelings, and they're attracted to each other. And when the waitress shows up, 3 or 4 minutes later to the table with something, and the man gets frustrated and shows his frustration and even says something a little negative about the woman, that's a lot of information about how he perceives people, okay? So what happens for the woman that he's on the date with? She just saw him put down a waitress. She saw him get frustrated at something very simple. She was 3 or 4 minutes later that he wanted his ketchup, right? And here's what happens. She feels that she likes this guy a lot. She feels that there could be something here. There is no way she's going to say the truth about what just happened for her, right? There is absolutely no way she's going to say, that was a little rude in how you just talked about that woman. And it makes me a little nervous in how you might one day talk about me. So is she going to say that? Not a chance, okay? So guess what happens on that very first date? An unspoken rule between them happens, right? It's like an unsigned contract that they both decide on, right? I'm not going to tell you the truth as long as you still love me. And once that happens, it builds from there. Time goes on and more serious things happen. They have children, they have a mortgage, they have serious life decisions. And by the time they get to me, sometimes the kids are going off to college and they realize they've been fighting and arguing for, 18 years. And they have to start communicating from scratch, and the man has to say, I feel pressured by you all the time and I've never told you that. And the woman has to say, I feel that I can never spend time with you and you're always doing your other projects, or whatever it is. They have to start from scratch telling each other the truth.
Okay, so you've been doing this for a long time, so I'm very fascinated to know, what is the most horrific first session there, right? The most horrific, it was basically about to be over,
right?
And it transformed through these sessions. And when you guys all looked back, you as well as the couple, you said, "Whoa, wow! I would have never thought they would have actually been able to make it." Do you have any of those?
Yeah, I have one right now. So,
okay.
A couple came to me and he's married and he but he's been kind of separated from in his mind for a couple years, and he met this woman a couple years ago and they've been dating, and they were locked in what I would call it a war, an emotional war. She's not going to feel safe unless he gets divorced, and he's not going to feel safe to be himself until she lets go of pressuring him to get divorced. He does want to get divorced eventually, but on his own terms, not from the pressure of his girlfriend. And they are locked. I mean, they are so uncomfortable that they have to hide that they're dating each other, even because the woman's friends and family have all just finally condemned her for being with a married man who won't leave his wife, right? Because they want to protect her. Okay, so they're locked in this war together, but they are deeply, deeply in love underneath it all. So I'm sitting there with this couple going, how am I going to get underneath this? Because I cannot slow communication down enough. Okay, so we are on maybe session number 7 together, and the woman cannot get a hold of him enough, meaning he's not available enough, and she doesn't, every time they hang out, she can't feel like she has a real relationship where she can make plans and share with him and share him with her family. She just can't get a hold of him enough. And so I'm sitting there and I just realized, I'm either going to have to tell this couple they need to stop and they just need to go away and break up, or something else needs to happen. And I was really racking my brain for an hour and a half into this session. And I came up with something that was a brand new concept for me. I thought of it. I actually talked about it the day before with somebody, but then it really solidified in my mind. So I said to them, why don't you move in together for 1 week? Why don't you move in together for 7 days? They have enough flexibility to do that because she's been wanting to, give him a dresser drawer and wanting his clothes at her house and wanting to just know what it would be like to have a real relationship. So they were either going to be offended or excited, and they got really excited about this. And I believe the next day he moved in with her. He brought all his clothes, he brought a suitcase, she gave him drawer space, and they spent 7 days together. So she finally had what she wanted. She knew what it would be like to wake up with him and, and know that she's going to get to have this for a week, right? Now, at the end of the 7 days, it kind of imploded and they got into some really big arguments. But then a couple weeks later, they came back to see me. And it's very interesting. She's entirely calmed down now. She actually isn't asking him to move in permanently. She actually is asking him to integrate into her life. She knows, she feels safe enough and knows he's committed enough to where she actually wants to step him into her life. She's able to now give him the space to divorce at his own pace. And they're not working this out like usual, like couples usually do, where I slow down the communication and I teach them how to get vulnerable about their feelings. They're actually succeeding because they went underneath and did this one behavior of moving in together for a week. And in the last session they were in with me, for the last half hour, she was actually sitting on the floor in his arms. So they both looked at me and they said, well, how about that? They asked me some question about what to do next. And I said, it doesn't really matter the answer that I'm going to give because you're sitting on the floor in his arms, right? You now feel safe and they're going to move forward. They're going to succeed. And for all intents and purposes, they normally would not have succeeded. That most therapists, counselors, coaches would not have known what the heck to do in this scenario. I believe that. They would have looked at the communication and the arguing and said, I can't help eventually. So, yeah.
Understanding.
Understand. People get it. People actually go to the wrong side a lot. It's understand each other.
Okay, understandeachother.com. We're here with Derek Hart. And Derek, I know one of the things that probably come up in your sessions are jealousy.
Right.
How big is jealousy in the success or failure of our relationships?
Yeah. That scenario, Oh, sorry about that.
Yep.
That scenario of back to the idea of the first date in the restaurant that wasn't going well. It actually starts there, what their communication is. Jealousy is something that is just another topic to communicate about. And it seems like it's a really big one. And the reason it's a really big one is that couples don't know how to talk about it. The truth is, it's so personal and so sensitive on both sides when jealousy happens that it's simply hard to talk about. It's very hard to look at your partner and say, when we were at this, when we were at this party tonight, I saw you interacting. She says it to her husband. I saw you interacting with this other woman, and because of our relationship lately being a little bit difficult, I saw you interacting and flirting with her, and it made me sad because I haven't felt in a long time that you look at me that way. And I don't want to say this to put you down or make you feel like you're doing anything wrong, but I just need you to know that hurt, and can we talk about this, because I know it's a difficult topic, right? Just saying something real about it, because I don't care how great your relationship is, jealousy happens, right? And then now let's say she was saying this to her husband and he heard it. That's a great moment for him to either be defensive or not. Because what's he going to say at that point, right? He's going to say, I wasn't doing anything. I was just talking to her. What's your problem? You're so jealous, right? Like, I'm there for you. And that is the beginning of an argument. And actually what's really unfortunate is when the couple is not honest about understanding they need to talk more about this, because he'll get defensive and then she'll roll her eyes. And then I will tell you that is a ticking time bomb that will destroy the relationship later. It might take 20 years, but if that kind of communication cannot happen, a couple will have longevity, maybe, but they will not thrive and go deeper and enjoy each other.
Wow. You said a word, flirt.
Yeah.
What is that? Fair play in a relationship or not?
Oh, I'll tell you, that is one of those areas where it takes every couple to organize what's okay and what's not. I'm in Northern California, which is particularly liberal about these topics. And I work with couples that call themselves polyamorous, which is kind of a fancy word for free love from the 60s. Where I know it's going on around the country a lot, but here it's unbelievable. I mean, I sometimes have 3 people in here that are all in a relationship, and we work out the ins and outs of that. It's kind of mind-boggling sometimes. But, flirting, it's so sensitive that it always comes back to the couple. When something happens where someone's feelings are hurt, can it get talked about? Okay. So, for some couples, a man having lunch once a week with a colleague that's a woman, there's no rule about that being a problem. But the truth is, the man knows if he's getting needs met by, this woman, and if he's getting some actual, sometimes romantic needs met, and he can't open up and talk to his wife as intimately as he does with this coworker. That's such a subtle thing, and you might say, well, the wife doesn't know, so it won't hurt her. But you know what? Underneath the relationship, it means there's a lie. There's some kind of lie about them not being each other's best friends. which is a great goal to have, being that open with your partner.
So basically flirting, does it depend on the relationship?
It depends on the level of safety of the relationship. It depends on if they can talk about it. Sometimes this is such a complex concept that sometimes couples make rules. They make rules like, you know what, you can hold hands with another woman, especially in this, Northern California. You can hold hands, but you cannot kiss, right? And then there's other more conservative approaches where, the woman says, you cannot cross that line into, 30 to 45 second hugs and making goo-goo eyes across the table and
motivating you to firm, fit, and fabulous. Here is our company website, www.femmefataleFitClub.bigcartel.com. We are a no-judgment zone, here to help any woman ready to take control of her health and well-being. Here's our blog, www.femmefatalefitclub.com. We offer not only personal training services and virtual fitness programs, we also offer products such as water bottles, a cute inspirational tank top for women that says #TeamNoExcuses, and support across our social media channels. Come join the club. Follow us on Instagram at Femme Fatale Fit Club, or join our group on Facebook at Femme Fatale Fit Club. Now back to your favorite podcast.